Today's guest is Dr. Edward De La Torre, a professor devoted to higher education, physical training, and wellness. But before we jump into today's episode, let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where life suddenly gets your attention? Maybe a moment that just makes you pause and really look at the direction you're heading. Well, sometimes those moments arrive quietly, and other times they force us to slow down and reflect on what really needs to change. In this episode, Dr. De La Torre shares how an unexpected hurdle entered his life and challenged him to rethink his path. But instead of staying stuck, he made the intentional decision to begin implementing change, one small step at a time. His story is a reminder that transformation rarely happens overnight. Sometimes it simply begins with the decision to pause and be brave enough to take that first step forward. Hey there, I'm Jenny Perez. I'm a wife, mom, and small business owner. And although I love being all of those things, I'm at the point where I feel like there's something more to life outside of those roles. Does that sound like you? If you're in search of that extra magic, craving a dose of positivity, purpose, and real talk on being worthy, capable, and able, you're in the right place. Let's kick off this journey together, ignite that spark, radiate some positivity, and discover what makes your life and business truly shine. Ready to jump in? Let's spark some radiance together. Welcome to Sparking Radiance. And let me just first begin by saying one of the things when I started Sparking Radiance, I knew that it was going to open doors to me meeting fun and interesting people. And just the little background that you and I got to share together, you are definitely one of them. You are a friend of a friend. And welcome to Sparking Radiance. We're so happy to have you here.
Happy to be here, Jenny. I really appreciate you making time to come and speak with me. Was introduced to your channel just a few months ago, and I really think it's a great theme that you bring to everyone of your listeners about how to kind of reignite that light, which is something that we all kind of need in our life from time to time. So I appreciate being here.
Yeah. Well, tell our listeners a little bit of background about your story. Anything you want to share. You have a lot to share, and we got a lot to kind of kick in there. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
So I'll kind of do my little pitch, which is that I do have a doctorate of education is kind of my pride in terms of what I have accomplished in my life. In terms of my educational background, fully though, I have a BA in psychology. I pivoted into a master's degree in business and then landed with a doctorate in education. So that trifecta of education, psychology, and business really leads a lot of what I do, not only professionally and career-wise, but a lot of my general interests and what I do to try to connect with others, whether I'm teaching in a classroom or doing a corporate training exercise or just being involved in my normal operational work that I do within higher education institutions. So I really focus on those areas. And within those areas, I look for things that really connect to all those different avenues and aspects of life, being psychology, education, and business, really leadership. And that big part of that is our mindset about how we approach life, about how we think about ourselves and respond to the complications we may encounter in life. And what do we do, not only to make the best of it, but to learn from this journey that we're all on, which is called life, right?
Yeah. Share a little bit about some of your stories because I love that. And I love how you kind of see or trying to make sense or how they all interconnect. But share to our listeners a little bit of that background of what you kind of shared with me. And you have some big hurdles. You've had things that have definitely come in your path. And first of all, I want to congratulate you on those accomplishments that you have had. I don't say those lightly. I mean, I know that wasn't easy. And maybe share to our listeners a little bit about that, like that process.
Yeah. So one of the obstacles we'll talk about, which is also kind of leading into my next ambition, I am studying to be a certified wellness coach. And that is stemming from one of these major hurdles I had in life, which was with my own physical health. So I'm not putting any blame. I'm just saying part of that doctorate program I was talking about, it is an all-consuming type of process. Anyone who's ever gone through any type of doctoral program in physics and engineering and any field knows that it's a full-time commitment and it takes a lot out of you mentally, emotionally, socially, physically. Glad I did it. I would only do it once, but at the end of it, because I had thrown myself into that, as well as balancing full-time work, trying to make ends meet, still have some relationships and focus on still, I've always been a very avid gym, a fitness trainer. What I wasn't so good in regulating was my nutrition, what I ate and put into my mouth. And I had always been more a person growing up through my 20s, a more lean person. And so, without really even looking thoroughly at myself in the mirror, I didn't realize, but I had put on a lot of mass, which was purposeful because I was trying to do powerlifting at that time, but it was unhealthy mass. And I got to the point where I was diagnosed in my mid 30s with being a pre-diabetic, right? And basically the precursor to being a full diabetic, which comes from an overconsumption of calories, also highly overconsumption of sugar and having that intake. And I would also indulge a little too much, let's say, in alcohol and other things that would mess up my biological systems, my liver, my respiratory system. My cardiovascular wasn't great because I wasn't really doing the running that I used to do in my 20s. And so I got to that point where I was suffering from headaches all the time. I was sweating. I was thirsty all the time. My skin was horrible. And I just thought it was the aging process. I just thought, well, I'm in my mid 30s. This is just what happens to everyone. And it basically came to a point where I had to have a wake up call where I just woke up one day and said, this is not right. So I went to a doctor's office, talked to a doctor that glad just said it straightforward and like, look, your blood sugar at what was 9 a.m. in the morning, you haven't eaten anything, is 110 in terms of, sugar. And anything around like, I don't really know, but I know below 100 is what's desirable. So the fact that I, without eating anything, was over 110 meant that I had over consumption, not like sugar, but so many calories in my system. And so because I was diagnosed pre-diabetic, I thought, okay, first thing I have to do as I go home is change the diet, is jump into this wholeheartedly. I'm focused on longevity, appreciate that, things have to change. And so I went to my refrigerator, got out all the Cokes, got out all the candy from my pantry cabinet, took out all the ice cream, whatever, hoisted it over my shoulder and threw it into the garbage because I thought it has to be now where I focus on what is essentially cleaner eating, right? Whole foods, looking at what was really processed and limiting that, figuring out what exactly is best. So I went in and got books. I talked to a few friends who were more into health and fitness than I was, did research on, did Google about what should I do. I ran into a book that was called Eat Right for Your Blood Type, was one of the major recommendations to me. And then I'm blood type O, and that led me to, under that theory was that you should be eating according to this progression about how blood has evolved over time and what is associated with you either being a type O, a type A, type B, and AB in that progressive manner, meaning that if I'm a type O, I really should have a diet of a hunter-gatherer, right? I should be focusing on clean proteins, on vegetables and fruits, not so much heavy like breads and pastas, and not much at all anything that's processed. Stick to those whole food. Nuts is fine. Anything that's fats that are natural would be good. So it really made me hunker down, put down a spreadsheet, type in these things that I should be eating versus not eating. I even thought to myself, what were things that caused me problems when I eat? At the time, I could not really digest fish all that well. Salmon in particular, I know would just always cause me having indigestion. Bell peppers, for whatever reason, would also disagree with me. And I was even having, I knew I'm still lactose intolerant, but any type of cheese or anything would also kind of aggravate me. So
Was that related to your blood type, or was that related to the
and the book kind of related to that, saying that it's also part of the blood type where
Okay.
seeing your conception of that. I do have a caveat about that, and I'll get to in just a bit. But it made me think about, oh, okay, I should focus on eating these things, particularly like salads and broccoli, nuts. Actually, it promoted for me to eat a lot of beef. And, we always heard that beef is bad. It leads to cholesterol, leads to, heart conditions and all that. But this book was saying, no, you should actually be eating quite a bit more than what is recommended and so forth. And so, I kept that momentum in my interest. And I would say that when I started, I was at 205 pounds. I'm a 5'7", 5'8" type of guy. And so my ideal weight was always promoted as optimal 168 would be the highest. That's to me, I always like to be on the larger side, having been so lean before as a runner. I was a long distance runner. So I was always more kind of a very lean and skinny. As I kind of put on bulk, I preferred having a little bit more size. So, but I realized that it was size that wasn't that good for my frame and not good where my body was saying this is too much. So then a few months, I curtailed it down. 10 pounds went by pretty quick. And then over the next of the few years, another 10 pounds, another 7, so forth, where I got down. By the time we got to 2019, I was probably in the 160s. So I was kind of where I was at. And I will say by that time, I was about 38, I think, or 37. And I felt like I was 10 years younger. Before, when I was having all these health issues, I felt like I was in my 50s, 60s, in my mid 30s, I was still aged 20 years. Now, just a few years later, I felt 10 years younger. I could run. I had energy perpetually throughout the day. I could tackle anything that came at me and still go to bed, but still be very alert and just ready to take on the next day. So cleaning up the diet was a big part of it. Limiting exactly how much alcohol consumption I had was also a big part of it. And I will say since 2019, I've been very good at maintaining it with some fluctuation up and down. But all those foods that I told you that I couldn't eat, I could not eat fish. I could not eat cheese. I could not eat bell peppers. Today, I can eat all that and have no issue. So it really took the body some years to reshift and reconfigure itself. That's
Yeah.
one of the things I have now learned, and either through my own experience and now through listening to other podcasts and reading books, is that the human body is so capable of reconstructing itself, whether it's just its body composition or its respiratory system, cardiovascular system can really, with time and effort, reshift. I used to have these skin tags all over my face, and within 3 months of instituting all these changes, one day I remember just washing my face, and it was like this peel of skin just came off, and all those tags came off, as if I was like, you ever see those reptiles that shed their skin? Same thing happened that day. I will never forget it. And then the skin was glowing and glistening. I was like, I must be doing something right because I'm
Yeah.
lively again. So
Yeah.
it really, just that moment in time made me realize how important not only is that type of nutrition and having balance. And I had maintained my gym exercises and reconfigured a few things from being powerlifting more to more of a balanced type of fitness, that and having that mindset to,
Yeah.
okay, this isn't the end of me. I'm not going to be held back and just deal with these things and just continue on with these bad habits, that it was time for a change, and appreciating where that comes from. I want to quote, Angela Duckworth, or at least reference her, who talks about grit. It talks about having that mindset to being focused on success, being focused on growth, and not being so fixed on things that happen to you can only deal with at a time, or can you be more proactive and change things for yourself? That's where I realized that a lot of us have the power to do that, and I definitely have that power to do that from that journey.
Did you overnight just make a decision and let it play out? Or was it progression? Like, okay, I'm going to clean out my pantry. Okay, I'm going to be more aware. Because
Yeah.
I mean, from all of the, from experience, it's our number one issue, right? Like with food, and for a lot of us, relationship with food and what we are exposed to in our culture, right? But like, did you just make that decision and it was done? Or did you have to maybe create certain baby steps for yourself? Or, how did you check that?
Yeah, for me, it was cold turkey, but then after doing that, I realized I needed to do things a little bit more progressively. So,
Yeah.
yeah, as I said, day one, as soon as I came home from the doctors with that diagnosis, I cleaned out my refrigerator and pantry. I'm not kidding, just like that, and just left all healthy whole foods in my refrigerator. And then just like with my diet, I was told by the doctor to really restrict my sugar intake to less than 20 grams of sugar per day. So I said, I'll do 15. I will only consume, I think at the time I was consuming 4,000 calories. And so I said, I will consume only, 2,500, and all that. And I will say that shocked my system, that first few weeks I'm trying to attempt doing that. I still got headaches, not the same type of debilitating headaches I was experiencing when I was pre-diabetic, but just still, like hunger headaches, if you want to call it those. So I reintroduced a little bit more, just to help my body balance it out over time. And it was more about every year from 2017 to 18 to 19 making smaller shifts. Another big one was, as I mentioned, I really hadn't been doing much cardio, but I said, okay, I'm going to be, at the time, my first immediate was like, I'm going to be jogging every day. Okay. That is not, conducive to a healthy body with, could have very much joint issues and so forth. And so I said, okay, 3 times a week will be doable. And so I made that adjustment. So we're all kind of like living, breathing science experiments. And so it was very much pivoting and adjusting what I needed to do every so often, depending on what my body told me to do.
I love that. I love that. So, because I think as sometimes too, when we hear certain news, it's a lot of what backs our actions is the emotion of it, right? The emotion. So, in your case, the emotion of, hey, I don't want to have diabetes. Like, I'm in a position where I can change it. I'm going to change it. So, that's powerful. That is so, so powerful. So, you change obviously physically. What did it do to you emotionally?
Oh, I love that too. And you're right. I'm making it sound like it was so easy, it was so brisk, it was, daily. I will say that emotionally, of course, it was hard, right? Because we're always tempted by what is given to us and presented to us in the supermarket or a restaurant or at a friend's house with these little indulgences, chocolates or desserts or
Or holidays.
right,
Yeah.
or
It's like
yeah, the
there's the
holiday.
holiday is every holiday is associated with some form of sugar.
Right. Yeah. 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 And it's not that I cut it out completely. In fact, I baked myself a chocolate cake that I've been eating slowly but surely every day this week, So, but in terms of emotionally, I mean, it was difficult. But what I would do is because I know this was such an important thing for me to focus on, I took that accountability and I announced it to every person I knew, my family, my mom and dad, my sister, my friends, as I went over their houses. I even went on vacation to visit a friend who I hadn't seen around that time over in Alameda, which is by San Francisco. And I said, I won't be eating a lot of sugar or, I'm going to be very restrictive. It's not that I'm trying to, I'm not making a comment about your cooking or anything like that. It's just what I need to do right now for myself. And so it was well understood. So as long as you kind of, what I did was involve more people
Oh, yeah.
condition in my journey, I felt like I was building my support network and that
Yeah.
we all have our struggles and we all have these things. If you have friends and family that really want to see you improve, you bring them and share that experience with them. And I would say everyone was very supportive. So
Yeah.
the emotions came easy when I involved more people in where I was at and what I was going through.
Yeah, and genuinely, people want to be included. They want to be included. They want to be a part of that. Like, hey, and I think that's really cool that you did that with your friend and saying, hey, because I think if you were to have just avoided it altogether, like I'm not doing sugar, I'm not doing alcohol, I'm not doing, they might have taken offense to it. But the fact that you said, hey, it's not you, it's because this is what I'm doing and I want to make you aware. I mean, that's powerful too. Awesome. Awesome. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Yeah, but I will say, yeah, the weight loss journey and just the whole food eating, I can see how that would take a lot of determination to do. And I'm proud of you for that. So thank you
Yeah,
for sharing that.
thank you. Yeah. And I know another thing too we had talked about that also kind of, so that was my big, battle in kind of like the
Mhm.
later 2010s. In the early 2020s, I had another major battle that was outside of the physical realm that really challenged my growth mindset. Right. And sharing with you was that, this was kind of during the pandemic time, not 2020, but 2021, when we're still kind of in that lingering zone of being disconnected and not having really a true sense of what was going on in reality. But not to dive into too many details, but just to let you know the outcomes of what happened was that there was a case in my life where I had a bit of a stolen identity from defraud, an opportunity that I was defrauded on. And from that stolen identity, basically there was this run up of debt in my name with pretty much my signature just, and so I was accountable for that. Part of it was a little bit of my own fault for being a little bit too trustworthy and giving a little bit too much information and posting certain things online that we really should all be really wary about what we present on LinkedIn or on Instagram or whatever, because there are people out there that will take advantage of those pieces of information.
Yeah.
So what happened was that, yeah, I was defrauded into about, several $1,000s in debt. And, when I kind of learned from the bank about this and challenged it and yet saw all this documentation and information that's made it seem that this was legitimate, I, froze. I was like, I don't know how this happened. I don't know all the details, but what should I do? And luckily, the bank rep that I was talking about, well, if this is seriously to the magnitude of what you're describing, where you're being defrauded and having this false identity being taken advantage of, you need to talk to a lawyer, you need to get counsel, you need to, either look into bankruptcy, freezing all of your assets, and move now. And so I took that immediate, just like I took that doctor's advice, I took this, bank professional's advice to get the ball rolling and jumped into it. And so, yeah, I connected with a lawyer, or actually a few lawyers, to get their different diagnoses and points of view on the issue. Talked to Experian and all the financial firms I needed to freeze my credit and freeze my assets, and kind of go through scenarios. Do I claim bankruptcy and figure everything out? What happened? Do I just work with the lawyer to try to shore up the debt and try to find a loophole about being responsible for this or not? Or do I challenge this in any way? So every lawyer had a different viewpoint. And one lawyer, I again appreciated their black and white look at this. It's like, okay, you were criminalized, you were taken advantage of, right? There's a group out there of scammers or defrauders, whatever they did, and they took advantage of you. The best that you can do from them is hope that they're caught one day and that they are, given justice. Now, there could be a decision, if that's the case, that they have to pay you back that money, but because they're criminals, they're never going to do it. So that money's gone, right? So what you have to do is figure out, okay, I can work with you, work with the creditors to, basically support you, because I filed a police report too. That was one of the immediate steps too, and give the information quite blankly about all these emails and text messages and what was going on, where they presented themselves to be a certain authority and they were not, right? And with that police report, basically talk to these creditors and say, okay, we're going to have to play hardball because they didn't do their due diligence and making sure that whoever was profiling me was really me. And to see if that could also put some submission on a certain things. So I liked that lawyer, talked very common sense, broke it down to me, and I went with that one. And yeah, they did their part. I had a certain level of debt that was broken down, but it was still my responsibility to pay off to a certain point. So it took time. It took some budgeting. It took, again, accountability was the biggest thing. And when it happened, just like I had the diet and I had to include people, I said, well, this is another major thing. I got to own up what happened and tell everyone this is going to be my next battle that I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
Even though it was a little bit of, and I remember the first group of friends that I told, we went on a hike. And, we are all just catching up again. This was post-COVID. So we're still like, we're taking that time to reconnect and learn about what everyone's doing. And we all, I think it helped that I heard their stories about what they're going through. It wasn't, my story, but it was something else that they majorly went through. So when it came up to my turn, I felt kind of equipped. I'm like, well, they just were so vulnerable. They shared what was going on with them. This is what's going on with me. And I told them the same story about the defraud and the debt and so forth. And I was scared though, because of course you think that maybe they'll judge me, or maybe they'll say, oh, you're so dumb to have fallen for this or to allow this to happen to yourself.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, it was nothing but appreciation and empathy and showering me with support. And I was so calmed and felt like, okay, I can do this. If just these
I
people
can get through this.
I can
Yeah.
get through this. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Say the one thing that did, after the hike, we went to a happy hour, and I was really even at that moment trying to think, okay, how much can I spend and not spend? And I was kind of talking about the bill, and then they said, don't worry, we cover it, and that was when they said, don't worry about it, we got your back. That's when I knew whatever happened, I was going to be okay, because of that support network. So sure enough, I told, my parents, my sibling, my other groups of friends, and of all of them, not one told me I was dumb or stupid or, how could you have let that happen to yourself? Not one ever had that. So I was really maybe appreciative of the people I have in my life, really appreciative of the people that I chose, and realize that I'm so happy that so many of who I choose to be with know that we're all in this together. We're all in
Yeah.
this life and trying to do what's best. So, and it humbled me and gave me humility, and that was that, of course, unfortunately, it was a costly lesson, but it was still a lesson
Yeah.
worth.
Yeah. And what I found shocking with your story when you shared it with me before was that you actually paid some of that debt back, right? Yeah, that they'll talk about humility.
Yeah. Yeah, it was basically either declaring bankruptcy, and if I did that, I would shoot myself in the foot about ever possibly, wanting to buy a home, or, start putting that off for quite a while. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'm going to have to do a few things, change my budget. And at the same time, this is something I think I mentioned to you right before we got online, was that I also was hit with the knowledge that the job that I had at the time, I was not going to be contracted further into the next fiscal year. So I had 6 months to find a new job. And so that was a huge, like, all right, well, if I'm gonna get a new job, it's gonna have to pay a lot better, you know? So I
Yeah.
had that as well. And luckily that worked out very well. I got the job that I needed and did that process. So things, stars lined up despite them falling apart, just within
Yeah.
a few months prior. So yeah. And again, it comes from that mindset of, like, stuff will happen to you, positive or
Yeah.
negative. When it's negative, what are you gonna do about it? Are you gonna kinda sit there, cry? And it's fine if that does happen, right?
Yeah.
But do you allow it to overtake you and consume you? Or are you gonna be able to say, "All right, I had my time. What do I gotta do to correct this or move into the right direction or learn from this so I can actually become better from this?"
Yeah.
And that's where that theme taught me. And yeah, I'm here now to say that last year paid off that part that I needed to pay off. I have that now behind me and can move on to hopefully my next ambition rather than another problem. But they always,
But
right?
yeah, and I think I can definitely attest to the fact that you will every single one of us will have problems, but each one of the things that we get from each problem is we get to learn a new skill, we get to learn something more about ourselves, and I'm sure through both of those processes that you overcame, and you can see that now looking back, but I'm pretty sure in that moment, I mean, oh man, if I would have known that, to have to just pay that, I think that was just the most shocking to me. That's super painful to me. Like knowing that I didn't indulge in whatever they indulged in,
Yeah.
but I'm responsible for paying it back. That's terrible. And I think it just gives you a sense of awareness too, and the ability to now educate. Like, what did I learn from this? How can I help others, in my community, within my friends and family, like that awareness of, hey, it could happen to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Can have, and in different ways too. Like, and what happened to me, and having, as you said, basically somebody spent my money, somebody else spent my money, right? And so I saw no benefit from it. That happens to a lot of people, but in a lot of different ways, where they're not defrauded or scammed or that, but it might be a relationship that they're in, or it could be something that they thought that they were going to, really invest in, but it falls through, from something that dies in the stock market or security or something. And so there's a lot of those types of instances. And that's what I found when I should share what I went through. Somebody else would have something similar that they went through. They overspent on redoing their garage or their kitchen or something like that, where the emotions or the feeling about, how could you let this happen to yourself? Everyone feels that way. But I realize that, we have the shared experience, and we have the opportunity to learn from each other and to just accept that, yeah, some things we go through things very similarly with one another. So we're not alone is what I found out.
You being open and sharing, and definitely you being on this platform sharing those stories, I know will definitely make some impact with people, especially going through what they're going through. But after walking through those things, what would you say, like how you show up in life now? Like what are some things that you've learned from these two major things that have impacted you?
Yeah, it really, I mean, a couple of things that I really never thought about before these things happened. And one is that I am much more capable of things than I thought of, right? But I did realize that the first step for anytime you reach a major problem, whether it's really completely your fault or not, is to own your part in it, own what you're responsible for, take accountability that it's your life and you're accountable for your life, whatever that is or means for you. So the sooner that you're able to reach that point, it'll make everything else that you have to do after that point so much easier. And I feel like I just today I had a conversation with a friend where a lot of friction that person is experiencing with a loved one comes from there not being enough communication. And that's the one thing I realized that the best thing I could do was talk to people about what was going on with me. So they understood my mood or they understood what was driving my concern about things. So, like if I hadn't told my story to my hiking friends at the time, but I was suddenly just trying to, hassle about what I was eating, that probably would have disturbed them, without any context about what was my current state of mind, or my current state of being. But because I had, they're more than willing, oh, no, you know what? We understand where you're coming from. Don't even concern yourself. We got you this time. Don't worry. So, and I realized that is the main part is that accountability and that need for communication. However hard that might be, how much you have to kind of let go of your personal ego and I have a big ego, let me tell you, a lot of times my own father would say, your head is just full of hot air. I'm like, oh, okay, that's true. I should be floating in the sky. But it taught me that that's the best two things that you can do is have accountability and communicate what is going on with yourself. Now, what this also kind of let me to also do is thinking about when I had to dive deep into myself, into my feelings, into my thoughts in order to center myself. I realized that a kind of a constant daily thing I had to do, which is with, my wellness journey, my nutritional journey was, I wanted to eat this or I wanted to do that, but I couldn't because it was an indulgence or something. Or when I was going through the debt issue and I would love to buy this or spend this or invest in that, but I couldn't because I had to maintain this budget. Every day I would have to kind of center myself. Some people say it meditation, others might say being more mindful. I would say just being present with a day, being present with the moment. Think about my priorities. Think about what the day is going to be about or what it was about. Because sometimes I would do this kind of momentary presence and do it at the end of the day and think about what was done that day. And I think I've been doing that now ritualistically on a daily basis because I also felt that with these two major issues over the past several years, so much time has gone by so fast. And I think on our daily lives, so much goes on that we don't realize that we're living life when we're living it. And the small things about life, I think, get overlooked way too often. Could be the weather, the wind, in terms of how it's kind of hitting our skin or our faces. Could be the morning air and feeling the briskness and the promise of the day. Could be at night, feeling that kind of coolness that kind of bathes us and gets us prepared for slumber. Or it could be just if you're with friends and taking a moment to just take in the collaboration and the dynamic that goes on with the social group. Or if you're, a lot of times I'm finally realizing, okay, time to do your presence, Edward. I'm in the gym and I'm just kind of surveying the people in the gym that are focused. And you can tell some are really focused on the workout. Some are working out a problem while they're working out in their minds. Some are with their gym bros or their girlfriend or whoever or boyfriend and just enjoying that time of doing something collaborative together. But in those moments, I'm still present and saying, God, we're here going through the same motions still for the same purpose, which is to improve ourselves, to better ourselves. So any one of these moments, whatever they mean for you, whatever time of day you choose to, just for a few moments, I utilize to really say, this is what life is. This is what life is about. I'm blessed to be here and taking it all in just for this one moment. And so I've been doing that as a practice, pretty much as a goal, not only for this past year, but for this year as well.
I love that. I love that. There's so much power in that. I was going to also say too, like just instead of focusing, one of the things I heard you say, don't focus on the problem, focus on the presence. Like and I think a lot of times we get focused on the problem and we forget the presence for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And like I knew as I was having to, rescale my health or, pay off this financial situation I was in, it wasn't all going to be in one day, right? It would be a little bit each day, a little bit. And as long as I did my bit for that day, that is a
Mhm.
celebration. And that celebration for me was being present in that moment and knowing that, I am getting there 1 inch at a time. and it takes time. And I think a lot of us, fortunately, in the current system and society that we're in, is all about being hyperactive and focusing on instant gratification, wanting things to be completed or done with. So that can be left out of our mind and we don't have to deal with that stress anymore. And I see that a lot with my students. So I teach part-time within a Cal State campus, and I teach courses in business management. And I could tell when I get into certain areas regarding health management and wellness, even in the business courses, students, admit to being stressed all the time with things that they really don't need to be stressed about. And I think that's what I also learned, going back is to your question about what were some things I learned, was that not to sweat the small stuff. That I couldn't change these major things that were happening to me to combat that at that great magnitude, but I could do just a small bit, every day. And that was with what was within my control. And that's what we all need to realize too, is that we have the capacity and the power to change everything, but one small thing, one small moment, one small effort at a time. And I think appreciating that and realizing that's what life is making these small adjustments over a long scope is what we do as humans. And it makes it easier and makes it better if we share that with one another and just allow other people into our worlds, because normally we're all kind of doing the same thing together.
Yeah, I love that there's so much power and strength and like honestly replay in that everything incrementally. And nothing great really happens overnight. Rarely, right? Everything great takes time. And that when it comes to our health, when it comes to our finances, when it comes to our relationships, right?
Yes.
Everything takes time.
Yeah.
Well, Edward, I appreciate you for being here on Sparking Radiance with us. I thank you for sharing your story with everyone, and you are absolutely right.
Yeah.
The power is in the presence, and focus on what you can control, what is present, and the problems are going to keep coming. They will come. It's inevitable. It is life, but it's what we choose to do with those problems and how we tackle them is what matters.
Exactly. And I will say that for those of us that are dealing with problems, when you deal with sizable problems, I mean, these might be small in comparison to someone who is fighting cancer or someone that is losing a loved one. Well, you are able to make it through these big problems. A lot of what the problems that used to be big are pebbles. They're small.
Yeah.
So it tests our strength. These problems test our strength, our character, and our minds, and our fortitude and our ability. But it gets easier. However crazy that sounds, it'll get easier.
Yeah, for sure. All right. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate it.
You hear that clap? That's me cheering you on for completing another episode. I don't know about you, but man, that was quick. If you liked what you heard, hit the subscribe button or share the episode with someone you think that might need a little spark. And help us grow by leaving a review. Remember, keep sparking that radiance from within. Until next time, shine on!